Ink and Voice Audio presents The Pool of the Black One, inspired by the tale of Robert E. Howard. In the vast, uncharted West, where no mortal has fully tread, ships have ventured forth since time began. Read, if you dare, the chronicle Skylos penned, as lifeless fingers tugged at robes of silk, and trace the wakes of vessels long lost, those sails torn by the wind, never returning. Chapter 1. Sancha, once a noblewoman of Cordova, gave a dainty yawn, then stretched her lithe body with feline grace, settling herself even more comfortably upon the silk-draped deck at the rear of the carrack. She was well aware, though lazily so, that the sailors watched her with blazing eyes. From both the forward deck and midship, her short silk tunic left little of her alluring figure to the imagination. A sly smile touched her lips, and she prepared to drift back into slumber, before the sun, now rising above the sea, could strike her face with its golden glare. But just then, a sound unlike the groaning of wood, the thrum of rigging, or the slap of waves caught her ear. She sat up quickly, eyes narrowing toward the ship's railing, and was stunned to see a drenched figure pulling himself aboard. Her dark eyes widened, her lips parted in a silent gasp. The man was a complete stranger. Water poured from his massive shoulders and arms, soaking the crimson silk trousers he wore, as well as the broad, gold-buckled belt that held his sheathed blade. He stood tall beside the rail, a living statue cast in bronze, as the sunrise painted him in fire and light. Running his fingers through his soaked black hair, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers. "Who are you?" she asked sharply. "Where did you come from?" The man motioned casually toward the open sea, his gaze still boldly fixed on her. "Are you some sea spirit?" she asked, thrown off by his unwavering stare. "That you emerge from the depths like this?" She was used to admiration, but something about him unsettled her. Before he could answer, footsteps thudded across the deck. The ship's captain appeared, fury in his eyes, one hand already brushing the hilt of his sword. "Who in the depths are you, knave?" he snapped. "Conan," the stranger replied, calm and steady. Sancha perked up at the name. His accent was foreign, Zingeran, but not quite. "How did you get aboard my vessel?" the captain growled. "I swam." "You swam?" the man barked in disbelief. "Do not toy with me, fool. We're miles from any shore. Where do you hail from?" Conan lifted a powerful arm, pointing eastward, where the sun blazed along the waves. "From the islands." The captain's expression shifted. His eyes narrowed, mouth curling with distaste. "Ah, one of those Barakan dogs, then." Conan gave the faintest smile. "And do you even know who I am?" the captain demanded. "This is the wastrel, so you must be Zaporavo." The reply pleased the man, though he tried not to show it. Zaporavo stood tall, equal in height to Conan, though leaner. His stern, hawkish face was shaded beneath a steel helm. Men called him the Hawk. His armor glittered with wealth and pride, like a nobleman of Zingara. Yet even now his hand hovered close to his weapon. There was no warmth in the way Zaporavo stared at Conan. Tensions ran deep between the seafaring exiles of Zingara and the outlaws who roamed the Baracha Isles off the southern coast. These pirates, mostly Argosian by birth with a mix of other breeds, plundered trade routes and ravaged the Zingeran shoreline. Ironically, the Zingeran raiders did the same, but cloaked their deeds under a more respectable title, freebooters. They scorned the Barakans as common pirates, even though both groups danced to the same tune of theft and bloodshed. It wasn't the first time a thief tried to polish his reputation, nor would it be the last. Such reflections stirred in Zaporavo's mind, as his fingers toyed with the hilt of his blade, and his scowl deepened at the uninvited guest. Conan, meanwhile, betrayed nothing of his thoughts. He stood with his arms calmly folded, as if he were aboard his own vessel. His lips curled in a relaxed smile, and his eyes remained cool, unreadable. "What business do you have here?" the freebooter snapped. I found it necessary to leave Tortage before the moon rose last night. Conan answered casually. I set off in a leaky skiff, bailed and rowed through the night. Just as dawn touched the sky, I spotted your sails and abandoned the wreck to the sea, making better time in the water. There are sharks in these seas, Zaporavo growled, annoyed by the casual shrug Conan gave in return. He glanced toward midship, where a crowd of eager faces peered upward, ready to surge forward with blades at a single command, a wave of steel that could overpower even a fighter like Conan. Why should I clutter my deck? With every stray the sea spits out. Zaporavo sneered. His words were harsh, but his tone and look were even harsher. A ship can always use a skilled hand. Conan replied without offense. Zaporavo frowned. He knew it was true, but in hesitating he lost more than he could imagine. His vessel, his command, his woman, and eventually his life. Not that he could foresee any of that. To him, Conan was just another vagabond, brought in by the tide. He disliked the man instinctively, though Conan had given no reason for it. There was no arrogance in his tone, just a confidence Zaporavo found hard to stomach. You'll earn your place here, snarled the hawk, off the quarterdeck. And remember, my word is the only law aboard. Conan's thin smile widened ever so slightly. Without protest and without hurry, he turned and descended from the poop deck. Not once did he glance back at Sancha, though she had watched the entire exchange, with rapt attention. As he stepped onto the lower deck, the crew closed in, zingerins all, bare-chested and wrapped in colorful, tar-streaked silks. Their earrings glinted with jewels, as did the hilts of their curved daggers. They were ready for an age-old ritual, testing the newcomer with mockery and violence. Here, reputation would be forged through fists or steel. Up on the higher deck, Zaporavo had already dismissed Conan from his thoughts, but Sancha continued watching, tense with anticipation. She had seen this kind of spectacle before, and it always turned savage, sometimes fatal. Yet even her experience was nothing compared to Conan's. A faint grin touched his lips as he walked into the ring of hostility. His eyes scanned the faces without alarm. His calm remained intact. He knew how these things worked. Had he attacked the captain, every sword would have turned on him. But against one challenger, he would be given a fair fight of sorts. The man chosen stepped forward, a wiry, snake-like figure, with a crimson sash wrapped about his head. His chin jutted out sharply, his scarred features twisted into a cruel sneer. Everything about his stance dared offense. His way of starting the fight was as blunt and brutal as he was. Baracha, huh? He sneered. That's where they train mutts to walk like men. We of the Brotherhood spit on the lot of you. Like this. He spat in Conan's face and reached for his blade, but the Barakan moved too fast to follow. His fist smashed into the attacker's jaw, with a crack like splitting wood, and the man was hurled across the deck, like a broken doll, landing in a limp pile beside the rail. Conan turned calmly to face the others. Aside from the cold flicker in his eyes, his demeanor hadn't changed. But the contest was over, just as suddenly as it began. The crew gathered the fallen man. His jaw hung broken, his head sagged unnaturally. By Mitra, his neck snapped, exclaimed a dark-bearded sailor. You freebooters have brittle bones. Conan laughed. Where I come from, we barely notice a tap like that. Anyone else care to test steel instead? None moved. Good then, he smiled. Friends, is it? Voices agreed quickly. The limp body was heaved over the side, where a dozen dark fins sliced the water below. Conan chuckled and stretched his arms broadly, like a great panther waking from sleep, his gaze drifting back toward the upper deck. Sancha leaned over the ship's railing, her lips parted slightly and her dark eyes sparkling with curiosity. The sun behind her cast her slender form in silhouette through the sheer fabric of her tunic, making her figure almost visible beneath its glow. But then a tall shadow fell across her. Zaporavo had approached, his expression stormy. and his heavy hand landed possessively on her narrow shoulder. There was both warning and meaning in the glare he shot toward the deck below. Conan simply grinned back, as if in response to some private joke. Zaporavo made the same mistake that many rulers make. Isolated in grim authority atop the ship's rear deck, he underestimated the man standing below. He had the chance to kill Conan and didn't take it, too preoccupied with his dark reflections. So long had he stood in positions of power, trampling foes beneath his boots, that he no longer considered any man under his command to be a real threat. He assumed, unconsciously, that he was beyond the reach of those he deemed beneath him. Yet Conan gave him no reason to act. He blended in with the rest of the crew, worked hard, joked with them, and lived their life as if he belonged. He turned out to be an exceptional sailor, stronger than anyone aboard, and he often tackled the toughest, most dangerous tasks without hesitation. The crew came to depend on him. He never quarreled, and they made sure not to provoke him. He gambled freely, wagering his sword belt and scabbard, and even when he won, he returned the spoils with a laugh. Slowly, the men began to look up to him as their leader in the forecastle. No one knew why he'd fled the Baracha Islands, but the very mystery added to his aura. That he might have committed some violent act severe enough to exile him only raised their respect. Toward Zaporavo and the ship's officers, Conan remained calm and respectful, not arrogant, but not subservient either. Even the most thick-headed among the crew noticed the sharp contrast between the gloomy, tight-lipped commander and the boisterous, free-spirited seaman whose laugh echoed across the waves, who sang crude songs in countless tongues, drank deeply, and seemed to carry not a single care for the future. Had Zaporavo known that anyone, even subconsciously, was comparing him unfavorably to a common sailor, his fury would have been beyond words. But he was lost in his own brooding world, growing darker with each passing year, haunted by fading ambitions and the sour taste of all his pleasures, including his bitter grip on Sancha. And she, in turn, looked more and more at the dark-haired giant moving among the crew, whether at work or at rest. Though he never spoke to her directly, his eyes revealed a blunt honesty. She understood that look, and wondered if she had the courage to play the dangerous game of drawing him closer. Not long ago, the palaces of Cordova had been her world. Yet that life felt like a distant dream now. It was Zaporavo who had torn her screaming from a burning ship, taken during one of his violent raids. Once the cherished daughter of a Cordovan duke, she had since learned what it meant to be the captive of a sea raider. But she was clever, flexible. She bent instead of breaking, and that's how she survived where others perished. And being young, full of life, she began to find strange enjoyment in this harsh, dangerous existence. The life of a freebooter was unpredictable, full of sudden extremes, violence, treasure, bloodshed, escape. And with Zaporavo at the helm, their days were even more volatile than most pirates. His true intentions remained a mystery. Now he had led them beyond the edges of known seas, deeper into uncharted waters where ancient sailors had vanished without a trace. All familiar shores were behind them. Day after day, only endless blue met their gaze. There were no ports to raid, no merchant ships to plunder. The crew began to murmur, but none dared speak openly while Zaporavo stalked the deck in brooding silence or pored over ancient maps and brittle scrolls, parchments so old they crumbled at the touch. Sometimes, he muttered to Sancha of forgotten continents, mysterious islands lost in foam-covered gulfs, guarded by dragons and filled with treasures hoarded by kings who lived before humans ever walked the earth. Sancha barely listened, arms wrapped around her knees. Her thoughts drifted constantly, not to the ominous stories of her grim captor, but to the bold, powerful figure who laughed like a thunderclap and moved with the ease of a sea-bred beast. Then, at last, after many dull weeks, they sighted land on the western horizon. At sunrise, they anchored in a shallow cove and saw a ribbon of white beach bordering soft green hills veiled by trees. Fragrant air drifted toward them, rich with the scent of spices and new growth. Sancha clapped her hands in excitement, eager to go ashore and explore. But her delight quickly soured when Zaporavo, without giving a reason, ordered her to remain on the ship. He never explained his commands, and she never knew whether he acted from logic or cruelty or both. So she remained on the upper deck, sulking, watching the longboat slip away across calm jade-green water, glimmering beneath the golden morning sun. From her perch on the ship's deck, Sancha watched the crew cluster on the shore, tense and wary, their weapons ready. A few men broke away from the group, disappearing into the trees that lined the edge of the beach. Among them, she recognized Conan without doubt, tall, bronze-skinned, his movements agile and confident. There were whispers that he wasn't a civilized man, but a Cimmerian, one of those fierce tribesmen from the gray hills of the far north, whose raids were feared across the south. And indeed, there was something untamed about him, something raw and powerful that made him stand out, even among these hardened buccaneers. Shouts and laughter echoed faintly from the beach as the pirates grew more comfortable in the stillness. Their tight formation dissolved as they began to explore, searching for fruit among the trees. Sancha watched them clambering through the branches, plucking what they could. Her mouth watered at the sight. Frustrated at being left behind, she stamped her foot and cursed in a voice sharpened by too much time among foul-mouthed sailors. The men ashore had discovered an abundance of fruit, especially one unknown, golden-skinned variety that seemed exceptionally sweet. Yet Zaporavo showed no interest in food. Once his scouts reported no signs of threat, no creatures, no inhabitants. He remained rooted in place, staring inland at the rolling green slopes that stretched beyond the trees. With a short command, he adjusted his sword belt and strode into the foliage. When one of his mates protested, suggesting it was dangerous to go alone, Zaporavo silenced him with a brutal punch to the face. He had his own reasons for secrecy. What drove him was a half-mad belief, a hope sparked by the ancient book of Skylos, which hinted that this island might be the one spoken of in its cryptic pages. According to legend, this forgotten land hid monstrous guardians, ancient crypts, and treasures gathered long before mankind's rise. Zaporavo had no intention of sharing such riches if they truly existed, especially not with his own crew. From the deck, Sancha kept her eyes fixed on the trees and saw him vanish into the dense greenery. Not long after, Conan turned from the others, cast a quick glance up and down the beach, then followed the same path Zaporavo had taken, slipping silently into the forest. Her curiosity flared. She waited, eager for one of them to emerge, but the moments dragged on with no sign of either. The crew lounged lazily now. Many had drifted inland, while others dozed beneath the shade, half-eaten fruit still clutched in their hands. Sancha watched them with unease. Why were they sleeping so heavily so soon in the day? Restless and drawn by both concern and intrigue, she wrestled with indecision. The sun blazed above, even as the canopy above the deck offered partial shade. Across a narrow band of calm, jade-colored water, the beach shimmered, its cool shade and mysterious forest beckoning her. She longed to escape the monotony of the ship and to uncover what lay hidden among the trees. More than that, she wanted to know what had passed between Zaporavo and Conan. She knew the risk. Zaporavo's punishments were merciless, but the temptation proved stronger than fear. Resolute, she slipped off her soft leather sandals, stepped out of her light kirtle, and stood naked on the deck, as unashamed as Eve in Eden. She climbed over the rail and down the ship's chains, then plunged into the water and swam to shore. Once on the sand, she paused, toes curling in the warm grains as she scanned the beach. Only a few men were visible, some distant, others sleeping soundly. She crossed the stretch of white sand and entered the shade of the woods. The trees grew in uneven patches, separated by rolling green slopes like meadows. With each step inland, the island's beauty unfolded, soft hills blanketed in grass, groves scattered like a dream, and narrow, flower-filled valleys winding between them. It was as if the land flowed endlessly into itself. A heavy, enchanted silence lay over everything. Suddenly, she came upon a level rise, ringed by tall trees, and the dream shattered. There, in the middle of trampled, blood-stained grass, lay Zaporavo. She gasped and instinctively stepped back, then crept forward, her body trembling, heart pounding. He was stretched out on his back, eyes open but lifeless, a deep wound carved into his chest. His sword lay near his slack hand. The hawk had swooped for the final time. Though she had no love for him, Sancha could not look at his corpse without emotion. He had been her captor, her tormentor, and yet the first man to claim her. She did not cry nor feel the need to, but her limbs shook, her blood ran cold, and a rising wave of hysteria clawed at her throat. Through wide, frightened eyes, she looked around. She was searching for the man she knew must be near. Her gaze met nothing but a circle of towering trees, their leaves thick and lush, encircling her like silent sentinels. Beyond them, the soft blue ridges of distant hills shimmered. Had the killer of the freebooter fled, fatally wounded? There were no traces of blood leading away from the lifeless form. Bewildered, she scanned the forest around her. A subtle rustling in the green canopy made her freeze, a sound too deliberate to be mere wind. She cautiously stepped toward the trees, her eyes searching the shadowed undergrowth. Conan? Her voice was questioning, fragile, sounding oddly small amid the sudden, heavy silence. A creeping panic gripped her, causing her knees to weaken. "Conan!" she called again, more desperately this time. "It's me, Sancha. Where are you? Please, Conan." Her voice broke off as dread spread through her. Her brown eyes widened in sheer disbelief. Her lips parted, but no words came, only a strangled, voiceless scream. Her limbs refused to obey her. Though everything in her screamed for flight, she could not move. All she could do was release a silent cry into the looming stillness. Chapter 2. When Conan saw Zaporavo wander into the forest alone, he knew his long-awaited opportunity had arrived. He had eaten nothing, had not participated in his companion's games or banter. Every sense had been focused on observing the pirate leader. The crew, used to Zaporavo's odd behavior, saw nothing strange in his desire to explore a potentially dangerous, unfamiliar island on his own. They turned to their own distractions, unaware that Conan slipped into the shadows behind the captain, silent as a panther on the hunt. Conan never underestimated Zaporavo's authority over the men. Yet he had not earned the right, through trial or raid, to challenge the captain in a formal duel. According to the unwritten rules of freebooter conduct, such a challenge required proof of worth. Out here on this desolate sea, no such chance had arisen. If he were to attack Zaporavo publicly, the crew would side with their captain. But if he could slay him quietly and unseen, the men, left without a leader, would likely follow whoever remained. Among wolves, only the living held sway. With sword in hand and fire in his veins, Conan followed Zaporavo until they reached a flat rise, a natural clearing surrounded by tall trees. Between their trunks lay endless waves of green slopes merging into the hazy blue horizon. Sensing pursuit, Zaporavo spun, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. "You cur, why are you following me?" the pirate snapped. "Is that even a question?" Conan laughed, striding forward without hesitation. His grin was broad, and in his ice-blue eyes danced a wild, savage light. With a curse, Zaporavo drew his sword, and steel met steel in a clash that rang through the glade. Conan charged recklessly, his sword weaving a blur of gleaming arcs around him like a whirlwind of blue fire. Zaporavo, hardened by countless battles on land and sea, was a master of the blade. None alive knew the art of swordplay better than he. Yet never before had he faced a foe whose strength was born of wild lands beyond civilization, where muscle and instinct ruled. Conan's blows came fast and fierce, far beyond the speed or power of any city-bred man. Though untrained in refined technique, Conan fought with an animal's raw intuition, each strike as natural as the movement of a wolf in the forest. Against such raw power and unpredictability, Zaporavo's practiced finesse meant little. Like a prizefighter facing a charging beast, desperation set in. Straining with every fiber of his being to block the storm of strikes, Zaporavo caught one blow near the guard of his sword. The force numbed his arm. Instantly, Conan thrust with such brutal strength that the blade pierced through chainmail and ribs as if they were parchment, driving straight into the heart. Zaporavo's lips twisted in silent agony. Fierce to the end, he died without a cry. His body slumped onto the trampled earth, blood beating like red gems in the sunlight. Conan casually flicked the blood from his sword, smiled in quiet satisfaction, and stretched like a contented jungle cat. But the contentment vanished in a heartbeat. His muscles tensed. Confusion washed over his features. He froze in place, the sword dangling forgotten at his side. Lifting his gaze from the corpse, he had been absently looking toward the forest's edge, and saw something utterly beyond belief. On a distant slope, a tall, black, naked figure had come into view. Draped over its shoulder was a pale, equally unclothed human form. The strange sight vanished just as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving Conan speechless, breath caught in his chest. He turned, peering back the way he had come, and cursed under his breath. He was shaken, perhaps not visibly, but enough that it would have startled anyone who knew his usual composure. Amid the earthy, vibrant reality of his surroundings, an image straight from a nightmare had been thrust into the scene, and Conan had no doubt about what he had seen. His mind was clear, his senses sharp. He had witnessed something unnatural. The dark figure had been too tall, unnaturally so, and the image of it running across the hills with a white captive was as eerie as it was unforgettable. Conan shook his head, unsure of what he had truly seen, yet he felt compelled to follow, curiosity driving him beyond reason. He set off in the direction the strange figure had gone, not bothering to question whether it was wise. His nature would allow no other course. He passed over rise after rise, soft green hills with groves scattered like clustered islands. Each slope seemed to lead upward, yet he found himself climbing and descending with such regularity that the whole landscape became a maze of grassy domes and shallow valleys, blurring together in endless repetition. At last, he reached what appeared to be the highest crest, and there his breath caught at the sight before him. Emerging from the earth like a vision, green walls and towers gleamed in the sunlight, so perfectly blended with the landscape that even his keen eyes had failed to notice them before. For a moment he hesitated, fingers brushing the hilt of his sword, then pressed on, his hunger to uncover the unknown outweighing caution. No one greeted him as he approached a wide arch in the curving wall. There was no gate or door to bar entry. Peering through with wary eyes, he found a broad courtyard carpeted in grass, encircled by the same translucent green stone. Multiple archways led deeper inside. With the stealth of a hunting cat, Conan chose one at random, sword drawn, and stepped into another courtyard. Tower spires rose beyond the inner walls, their forms alien and unfamiliar. One such tower jutted into the court ahead, with a broad stair climbing alongside it. He ascended, half expecting the dream to vanish, wondering if he had breathed the Black Lotus and now wandered its illusions. At the top, he found himself on a balcony or perhaps a narrow terrace. He could not tell which. From this height, he saw more of the strange towers, and a chill passed through him. No ordinary human had built these structures. Their form was symmetrical, yet twisted, following rules of design that were orderly but utterly mad. The place had a logic, but it was a logic not meant for sane minds. From where he stood, he glimpsed just enough to sense the place's structure. Many circular courtyards, each with its own wall, connected by open arches and all arranged around the heart of the city where the bizarre towers clustered. As he turned to look in the other direction, what he saw froze him in place. He dropped to a crouch behind the stone rail, his muscles tight, eyes locked in stunned disbelief. The ledge on which he stood overlooked a lower courtyard, and the far wall there was different, lined with what appeared to be narrow ledges stacked with small, indistinct objects. But Conan had no time for the wall. His attention was riveted to the figures gathered around a dark green pool in the courtyard's center. Black-skinned, naked figures crouched around the pool, tall, man-shaped, but unlike any men he knew. Even the smallest of them would have stood taller than Conan by a head. Their frames were lean and strong, but disturbingly graceful, not brutish or malformed. Yet there was something profoundly unnatural in their presence. Conan felt it deep within, something beyond the physical, something evil. In their midst stood a trembling, naked youth, one of the younger crew from the wastrel. So this was the captive Conan had glimpsed earlier, slung over a dark figure's shoulder. The boy had likely wandered too far from the others and been seized without resistance. There were no signs of battle, no wounds or blood on the giant's dark limbs. They hadn't needed violence. Conan called them black men in his mind, for lack of a better word, but he knew these were no men. Not in the sense he understood. They did not speak, though they moved and gestured to one another. One, squatting before the youth, raised a strange instrument to his lips, long and pipe-like. He blew into it, yet no sound reached Conan's ears. Still, the boy heard something or felt it, for he shuddered violently, his limbs twitching. The twitching became a rhythm, the rhythm a dance. But it was no dance of joy or freedom. The youth jerked and twisted in hideous spasms, his body writhing with movements no soul should ever make. The invisible tune controlled him utterly, fingers of sound reaching into his core, pulling free the most hidden parts of his being. It was not simply a dance. It was a stripping away of his will, his shame, his desires. It was a performance without choice, a compulsion of flesh. He moved with frantic intensity, not in ecstasy, but in horror. It was as if pain and lust had been woven into a single grotesque act. His body revealing all that should remain hidden, his soul laid bare before an audience of demons. Conan, hardened by battle and blood, felt a sickness rise in his throat. The dance was a violation, not of body but of spirit. Conan stood frozen, his expression twisted with revulsion, his gut roiling with sickness. Though he was as raw and untamed as a mountain wolf, he was no stranger to the dark cravings that fester in decaying empires. He had wandered through the decadent cities of Zamora, consorted with the infamous women of Shadizar. Yet what he sensed here went far beyond mere human corruption. It was a twisted offshoot of existence itself, something alien to mortal thought. These beings unearthed not the vulgar sins of man but horrors buried in the deepest, most shadowed recesses of the soul. That they could find joy in exposing such indecencies, truths unfit even for nightmares, was what truly chilled Conan's blood. Without warning, the tall black tormentor ceased his playing and stood. Looming over the writhing youth, he gripped him with both hands and plunged him, headfirst, into the green pool. The pale body flashed briefly beneath the surface, then vanished as the giant held it submerged. A stir passed through the rest of the ebon figures, and Conan instinctively ducked behind the balcony wall, unwilling to risk being seen. Time passed in silence. Eventually, driven by an unbearable need to know, Conan risked another look. The courtyard was emptying. The black figures were vanishing through an arch into another chamber. One lagged behind. Conan recognized the tall one with the bejeweled headband, the torturer. He set something on the far wall's ledge, then followed the others through the arch by which Conan himself had entered this strange place. They moved down the slopes toward the pirate camp, still unarmed, but Conan felt certain they intended harm. Yet before he left to raise the alarm, he needed to uncover the truth about the sailor boy. No voices broke the quiet, and Conan felt confident that the strange towers and courtyards were deserted now, save for himself. Swiftly he descended the stair, crossed the courtyard, and stepped through the archway the creatures had used. Now he understood the nature of the ringed wall. Ledges had been carved into the stone, running in long bands. Upon these, row upon row, stood tiny grayish figures, thousands of them. They were men or likenesses of men, no longer than a hand, but rendered with astonishing accuracy. Conan could distinguish their origins: Zingarans, Argosians, Ophirians, and Kushite sailors. The Kushite figures were black, just like their living counterparts. Unease gripped Conan's heart as he studied them. Something about their realism was deeply disturbing. He touched one, and found it cold, hard, like fossilized bone. But how could such material be so plentiful in this place? He couldn't make sense of it. He also noticed that the ledges were arranged in tiers. The upper ones bore types familiar to him, while the lower levels featured strange, unknown faces, either figments of alien imagination or remnants of peoples lost to time. Shaking off his unease, Conan turned to the pool. The circular courtyard held no shadows deep enough to hide a body. If the boy had been killed here, his remains had to be in that water. He stepped toward the emerald surface and peered down. It was like looking through thick, green-tinted glass, clear but strangely deceptive. The pool was small, bordered by a rim of jade, and round as a well. Peering into its depths, he saw the curved bottom, but he could not judge how far down it lay. It seemed impossibly distant, as if the pool were deeper than reason would allow. He felt dizzy, as though gazing into a bottomless pit. The deeper he looked, the more certain he became. The pool was empty. No corpse floated beneath the surface. Then where had the boy gone? Rising slowly, Conan sheathed his sword and scanned the courtyard again. His eyes drifted toward one of the upper ledges. There, he had seen the tall black one place something there. A cold sweat beaded on his skin. As if pulled by a force he couldn't resist, Conan approached the ledge. Dread gnawed at his gut, but he forced himself to look. There, staring blankly outward, was the face of the Zingeran youth. Reduced, rigid, unmoving. Perfect miniature in stone. Conan staggered back, chilled to the core. His hand went limp around his sword, mouth agape, mind shuddering under the weight of the impossible. The truth struck him like a thunderbolt. Unspeakable, inhuman, and utterly real. Still, the truth was undeniable. The mystery of the tiny statues was exposed, though behind that truth lurked an even deeper and more unfathomable mystery about their existence. Chapter 3. Conan had no idea how long he stood there, lost in a dazed whirl of grim speculation. It was a voice, shrill, rising in pitch, that jolted him back to the present. A woman's scream that grew louder and more urgent as if the speaker were being brought closer. He knew that voice, and in an instant the spell of paralysis snapped. In one powerful leap, Conan vaulted up the narrow stone ledges, kicking aside the miniature statues that cluttered his footholds. A second jump, a scramble, and he clung to the rim of the wall, peering beyond it. It was an outer wall. Beyond lay the green field surrounding the sinister castle. Across the meadow, a towering black figure was striding, clutching a squirming captive under one arm as easily as a man might carry a struggling child. It was Sancha, her flowing black hair disheveled, her dusky olive skin stark against the gleaming black of her captor. He ignored her frantic squirming and desperate screams as he made his way toward the main archway. As soon as the pair vanished from sight, Conan leapt down the wall with reckless speed and slipped into the far arch leading to the adjoining courtyard. There he crouched, watching the monstrous black figure emerge into the pool court, still holding his writhing prize. Now at closer range, Conan could better study the creature's details. The perfection of the figure's form and physique was more striking up close. Under the glossy black skin, powerful muscles rippled, and Conan had no doubt the creature could tear a man apart barehanded. The creature's fingernails had become claws, long, curved talons, like those of a jungle predator. Its face was smooth and mask-like, a thing of polished onyx. Its eyes were gold deep, glowing, and alive with a strange light. But the face was anything but human. Every line and feature pulsed with a wickedness beyond that of any man. This thing was not of mankind. It was a vile twist of life from some unhallowed abyss, a mutation bred in some godless pit of unnatural creation. The black beast flung Sancha down onto the grass. She lay groaning, paralyzed by fear and pain. The creature scanned the area, its golden eyes narrowing as they landed on the disturbed shelf where the figurines had been knocked from their ledges. With a quick movement, it stooped, seized Sancha by the neck and the hips, and turned with purpose toward the green pool. At that moment, Conan burst from the archway and charged like a hurricane of fury across the grass. The black turned, its golden eyes flaring in shock at the sight of the charging warrior. In that split second of surprise, its grip loosened, and Sancha slipped from its grasp, falling to the ground. The taloned hands lunged, but Conan ducked under their reach and drove his sword deep into the creature's groin. The black monster crumpled like a fallen oak, blood gushing, And even as it fell, Sancha flung herself at Conan, wrapping her arms around him in a fit of terror and hysterical relief. Conan swore as he shook her off, but the creature was already dead. Its golden eyes stared blankly, and its long black limbs lay still. "Oh, Conan!" Sancha sobbed, clinging tightly. "What's going to happen to us? What were those things? This must be hell. And that thing, that was the devil. If that was the devil, hell's got itself a new recruit," Conan muttered grimly. "How did he get hold of you? Did they take the ship?" "I don't know," she said, trying to wipe her tears. She reached for her skirt, then remembered she wasn't wearing one. "I came ashore. I saw you follow Zaporavo, and I followed both of you. I found Zaporavo. Did you? Was it you who?" "Who else?" he grunted. "Then what happened?" "I saw something move in the trees," she whispered, shuddering. "I thought it was you. I called out. But then I saw that horrible black thing crouching like a beast in the branches, grinning down at me. It was like a nightmare. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then it dropped from the tree and grabbed me. Oh. She buried her face in her hands, trembling at the memory. "We've got to get out of here," Conan growled, gripping her wrist. "We need to get to the crew. They were asleep on the beach when I came into the woods," she said. "Asleep?" Conan swore furiously. "What in the 7 blazing hells? Listen!" She froze like a statue, pale and shaking. "I heard it," he snapped. "A moaning cry. Stay here." He sprang up the stone ledges again and peered over the wall. Then he cursed with such wrath that even Sancha gasped. The black creatures were returning. But they weren't alone. Each one carried the limp body of a man, some carrying 2. Their captives were the freebooters. They dangled lifelessly in the arms of their captors, and if not for a few weak twitches, Conan would have thought them already dead. The pirates had been stripped of weapons but not of clothing. One of the black creatures held all their sheathed swords, an armload of gleaming steel. From time to time, one of the seamen uttered a dull, confused moan, like a drunkard mumbling in his sleep. Conan looked around like a wolf in a trap. 3 arches led from the courtyard of the pool. The blacks had exited through the eastern arch. No doubt they would return that same way. Conan had entered through the southern arch, taken cover in the western one, and had no time to consider where it led. Despite not knowing the castle's full layout, he had to act without delay. He dropped from the wall and hurriedly began to set the scattered statues back in place. With frantic energy, he heaved the slain creature's body toward the pool and pushed it in. It sank instantly, and he caught a chilling glimpse of its flesh twisting, shrinking and hardening in a grotesque manner. He turned away, shuddering. Grabbing Sancha by the arm, he pulled her toward the southern arch. She begged for answers, her voice trembling. "They've captured the crew," Conan said bluntly. "I don't have a plan yet, but if we hide, they might not realize we're here. If they don't check the pool." "But the blood on the grass," she gasped. "Maybe they'll think it's one of their own foul creatures who bled," he muttered. "Either way, we've got to risk it." He led her into the courtyard where he had earlier seen the boy tortured. Quickly, they climbed the staircase that wound up the southern wall. At the top, he forced her into a crouch behind the low railing. It was a poor hiding spot, but the best they could manage. They barely had time to conceal themselves before the black giants returned, carrying limp bodies. Conan tensed, sword ready, as they passed below. But instead of ascending the stairs, the giants entered through an arch on the southwestern side. From there came the dull sounds of bodies being dumped, followed by groans. The prisoners, Conan's crew, were being thrown onto the grass like sacks of grain. Sancha gave a small, panicked laugh, but Conan silenced her instantly with a hand over her mouth. A few moments later, they heard the thud of footsteps and then silence. Peering cautiously over the wall, Conan saw the courtyard empty once more. The giants had returned to the pool, again squatting like statues while one of them played the golden pipes. Their eyes were fixed on him, listening, unmoving. The blood staining the grass and rim of the pool seemed not to matter. It was clear that such sights were common here. Taking Sancha's hand, Conan guided her back down the stairs, keeping low. She stared wide-eyed toward the archway, but the view of the pool and its grim gathering was blocked at their angle. At the bottom, the freebooters' swords were heaped where the captors had dumped them. That had been the sound they heard before. Silently, they crossed into the next courtyard. The pirates lay there in loose clusters, faces slack, earrings glinting, barely moving. One would stir or moan, lost in a drugged sleep. "What's that sickly sweet smell?" Sancha whispered nervously. "It's on their breath." "That fruit," Conan replied. "The one they all ate. Must have been like black lotus. Puts a man into a dreamless sleep. Look, they're starting to stir. But they're helpless without their weapons, and I doubt those monsters will wait long before they start whatever ritual they have planned. The crew won't stand a chance unless they're armed." He scowled, thinking hard, then grabbed Sancha's shoulder with a force that made her wince. "Listen, I'll draw those beasts away, buy some time. While they're chasing me, you wake the crew and hand them their swords. That's our only shot. Can you do it?" I don't know," she stammered, frozen in fear. Snarling, Conan seized a handful of her hair and shook her so hard the courtyard seemed to spin in her vision. "You must do it," he growled. "There's no other way." "I'll try," she gasped, eyes wide. With a grunt of approval and a heavy slap on her back that almost knocked her over, Conan slipped away. A moment later, he crouched in the archway, peering into the court of the pool. The giants still sat around it, but now they stirred, clearly growing restless. From behind him, he heard the pirates' groaning rise. Some were now cursing in confusion as they awoke. Conan crouched lower, muscles tense, breath calm. The jeweled black rose, lifting his golden pipes, and that was when Conan struck. He burst from the arch with the ferocity of a wild beast. His sword flashed 3 times before any of the giants could react. 3 fell dead with shattered skulls. Conan was already dashing across the sward by the time the others rose in alarm. They gave chase, long strides eating the ground, but Conan was fast and purposeful. He wasn't just fleeing, he was buying time. He had planned to lead his pursuers on a long chase, hoping to buy Sancha enough time to wake the Zingerans and arm them. But as he dashed into the court beyond the western arch, he swore bitterly under his breath. This court was unlike the others. It was octagonal, with only the single arch by which he had entered. Turning swiftly, he saw that the entire group of black giants had followed. Some gathered at the archway, while the rest fanned out in a line, slowly approaching. He backed toward the northern wall, watching as the formation bent inward into a crescent shape, seeking to trap him. He retreated gradually, noticing how the gaps widened between them. They were wary, afraid he might bolt around the edge of their formation, so they spread out to block every possible escape. He observed with a predator's focus, eyes sharp and calculating. Then, with no warning, he sprang into action, striking at the center of the crescent with the force and speed of a thunderclap. His sword cleaved the nearest giant through the chest, and before the others could react, Conan had broken free, sprinting toward the entrance. The group at the gate readied for his charge, but he didn't attack. Instead, he stopped and watched, calmly, without a trace of fear. This time, they learned from their mistake. They didn't stretch their line thin but gathered tightly into a dense formation, moving toward him deliberately. Conan understood what that meant. If they dragged him down and surrounded him, their size and claws would overwhelm him. His own fury and skill would not save him once entangled in that knot of muscle and fong. His eyes scanned the wall and spotted a ledge in a corner, its purpose unknown, but potentially useful. He edged toward it as the giants closed in. They likely thought they were driving him into a dead end, underestimating his intelligence. That was to his advantage. Underestimating an enemy is a fatal mistake. He was only feet from the wall when they rushed forward, confident they had him cornered. Even the group guarding the arch had abandoned their post to help. Crouched and snarling, the giants neared, expecting a desperate attack. An attack he did, but not how they expected. Conan raised his sword as if to charge, then spun and bolted toward the wall. With a fluid motion, he sprang upward, his hand catching the ledge above. But the ledge gave way with a loud crack, and he crashed back into the court, landing hard. The grass cushioned his fall slightly. He rolled to his feet, eyes glowing with primal fire. This was no longer a game. Now it was a fight for survival. The giants hesitated only a moment, then moved in for the kill, but a loud shout froze them. They turned to see a ragged mob pushing through the arch. Zingeran pirates, dazed and swaying, swords in hand, their eyes wild with confusion and rage. They didn't fully grasp the situation, but blood had been spilled, and that was enough. As the giants turned, Conan struck, his blade flashing in the sunlight, felling foes like ripe wheat. The buccaneers, roaring, stumbled into the fray. Chaos reigned. Though the pirates were still sluggish from the drugged fruit, they fought like madmen, their cuts powerful and furious. They far outnumbered the blacks, but the giants were formidable, taller, stronger, striking with claws and teeth, their blows shattering bones and tearing flesh. In the frenzy, agility meant little. The pirates couldn't dodge or maneuver well in the crush, and their minds were fogged. Still, they fought on, unthinking, brutal, relentless. Steel clashed like butchers' knives. Screams, curses, and war cries filled the air. Blood painted the grass. From the archway, Sancha watched, paralyzed by horror, her senses blurred. The court had become a maelstrom of steel and bodies, faces snarling and vanishing in a storm of carnage. Amid the nightmare, certain images stood out starkly. She saw a pirate, half blind with a bloody flap of scalp hanging over his eyes, plant his feet and drive his sword deep into a giant's stomach. She heard him grunt with effort, saw the black's golden eyes widen in pain as blood and entrails poured over the blade. Even dying, the giant gripped the sword with his bare hands. The pirate pulled desperately, confused and staggering. Then a massive black arm looped around his head, a knee slammed into his back, and with a sickening crack, his neck snapped. The limp body fell, and the victor flung it aside. But as the giant rose, a streak of blue light flashed across his shoulders. His head dropped forward, then tumbled grotesquely to the ground. Sancha nearly fainted. Her stomach heaved. She tried to run, but her legs refused. She wanted to shut her eyes, but couldn't. She stared, wide-eyed, nauseated and frozen. And still, somewhere deep inside her, the horror drew her in like a terrible, irresistible pull toward blood and death. This fight was unlike any Sancha had ever witnessed during seafaring raids or dockside clashes. It was primal, beyond human. Her eyes darted toward Conan. He was surrounded, cut off from his men by a thick tide of towering black figures. They had surged over him and dragged him down into the crush. But rather than being trampled immediately, Conan had seized one of his attackers and pulled him down as well. The dead weight of the fallen giant shielded him from stomping feet. They clawed and kicked at him, trying to pull their dying comrade away, but Conan clung fast, his teeth locked into the giant's throat. A surge from the Zingerans scattered the press, and Conan erupted from beneath the corpse, drenched in blood, terrible to behold. The massive creatures loomed over him like monstrous silhouettes, striking with savage fury. Yet he dodged and twisted like a maddened panther, and with every swing of his sword, crimson geysers leapt from torn flesh. Though his body bore the punishment that would have killed most men, Conan's strength and rage were undiminished. His battle cry rang out above the chaos, rallying the staggering Zingerans. Bolstered by his fury, they struck harder and faster, the slicing of flesh and snapping of bones growing louder than the screams and curses. The black giants faltered. Then they turned and ran for the gate. Sancha shrieked as they charged through the archway. She stumbled aside just in time as the Zingerans came howling after them, blades flashing. The narrow exit became a death trap. The pirates hacked at the backs of their enemies with triumphant shouts. The floor was slick with blood and strewn with broken bodies before the last of the survivors broke through and fled. The battle turned into a hunt. Across grassy courtyards, over bizarre rooftops, along the high walls, they fled, bleeding and desperate, harried by the vengeance of the pirates. Some made last stands, slaying more men before they were finally brought down, bodies shattered on the stone or hurled from dizzying heights. Sancha cowered in the courtyard by the pool, shaking with dread. She heard the roars outside, the stamp of feet, and suddenly, one of the black giants burst through the arch. Blood smeared his frame, and a pirate rushed in behind him. Cornered at the pool's edge, the black warrior snatched up a fallen sword. His swing crushed the pirate's skull, but the blow was awkward, and the weapon shattered in his grasp. He hurled the hilt at the crowd now pouring in and turned toward the pool with hate contorting his features. Conan burst through behind the others, running hard, but the black had already reached the water's edge. He threw wide his arms and let out a sound, one unearthly cry, the first and last ever heard from one of his kind. It tore the air like a curse from the abyss, and the Zingerans hesitated in shock. But Conan did not stop. Wordless and unstoppable, he drove forward, sword raised. Yet even as the blade swept down, the giant leapt high. For a brief instant, they saw him suspended above the water. Then the pool erupted. With a thunderous roar, green waters surged upward to meet him, swallowing him in a colossal explosion. Conan barely halted in time, pulling back to avoid plunging into the roiling water. He swung around, shoving his men back with broad sweeps of his arms. The pool was no longer calm. It had become a geyser, a towering spout of emerald fury. It howled like a storm, reaching toward the sky with a crest of white foam. Seeing Sancha frozen in horror, Conan roared a command that pierced the din and snapped her out of her trance. She rushed to him with outstretched arms, and he swept her up under one arm, running from the court as the geyser howled behind them. Outside, in the courtyard opening to the jungle, the survivors, bloodied, wounded, their garments torn, stood staring in dumb awe at the roaring pillar of water. It towered upward in a thick green column, streaked with white and crowned by a massive, foaming crown, wider than its base and growing. Conan scanned the faces and swore. Only 20 or so remained. In his fury, he grabbed one corsair by the throat and shook him until blood splattered from reopened wounds. "Where are the rest?" he bellowed into the man's ear. "That's all," the pirate shouted over the deafening roar. "The rest were killed. Those black devils." "Then move," Conan roared, shoving him hard toward the exit. The man stumbled away, reeling toward freedom. "That fountain's about to blow. We'll be swept away," wailed a wounded sailor, hobbling toward the gate. "Drowned," Conan bellowed. "We'll be blasted into stone dust. Move, damn you." He raced toward the outer arch, one eye fixed on the monstrous green tower that loomed over the ruins, the other watching for stragglers. Some of the Zingerans, dazed by bloodlust and the deafening noise, stumbled about like sleepwalkers. Conan drove them onward, grabbing the hesitant by the collar, hurling them bodily through the arch, sometimes urging them along with a boot to the backside and a stream of colorful curses regarding their ancestry. Sancha lingered, wanting to stay with him, but he shoved her away with a growl, ripped free of her arms, and gave her such a forceful slap on the rear that she stumbled forward and fled across the plateau. Only when he was certain that all his remaining crew had exited the castle and begun the trek across the open field did Conan finally turn to leave. He cast one last look at the raging green column soaring far above the towers like a monstrous tree, its foaming white crest threatening the sky. Then he turned and bolted. By now, the Zingerans had reached the edge of the plateau and begun descending. Sancha was waiting at the first ridge, and Conan paused just long enough to glance back. The fountain looked like some vast flower of emerald stalk and snowy petals shaking above the crumbling citadel. Then, with a sound like the shattering of the heavens, the green pillar exploded. In an instant, the castle disappeared beneath a crashing tidal wave. Conan seized Sancha's hand and fled, the roar of water thundering behind them. Hill after hill passed underfoot, and the ground trembled as the flood followed. Glancing behind, Conan saw the advancing wall of water, a wide green ribbon that surged up and over every rise, unbroken, focused, relentless. Terror surged through him. Sancha cried out and collapsed, unable to go on. Without hesitation, Conan lifted her across his shoulders and ran, his lungs burning, knees buckling, breath tearing from his throat. Ahead, the remaining crew staggered on, driven by sheer panic. Suddenly, the sea came into view, and there, miraculously untouched, lay the wastrel. Sailors flung themselves into boats in a mad rush. Sancha collapsed into one, a limp doll. Conan, though nearly blind from exertion, grabbed an oar and pulled with the others, every stroke agony. Behind them, the flood smashed through the treeline. Trees snapped and vanished into the green wave, which then surged across the shore and turned the waves a sickly, glowing jade. Driven by primal terror, the sailors pulled harder than ever, not knowing what evil followed, only that it was monstrous and unnatural. Conan understood. As he saw the green ribbon slither into the sea, unchanging, flowing straight for them, he pushed himself to his final reserves. His oar cracked from the force, but they reached the wastrel. Boats bumped against her hull, men scrambled up the chains. Conan hauled Sancha aboard and dropped her onto the deck. Then he seized the helm, shouting orders between gasps of breath. No one questioned him. They obeyed by instinct, staggering, bleeding, their minds fogged by horror. The anchor dropped, sails unfurled, and the ship came alive under the wind's pull. At the wheel, Conan glared toward shore. A green tongue of water crept toward the ship, but halted an oar's length away. Could come no farther. He followed its trail back across the shore and up the hills where they had fled. The threat, though failing to catch them, remained. Wheezing, Conan grinned at the crew. Sancha stood nearby, tears streaming. Conan's clothes were torn and soaked in blood. His sword stood embedded in the deck, chipped and crimson. His body was a mess of claw marks and bruises, hair matted with blood, an ear nearly torn off. Yet he laughed as he planted his feet at the wheel, reveling in his strength. "What now?" Sancha asked faintly. "The seas are ours for the taking," he roared. "The crew's half dead, but they can sail. And crews are easy to find. Come here, woman. Give me a kiss." "A kiss?" she shrieked, half hysterical. "Now? After that?" His booming laughter rose above the crack of sails. He caught her in one arm and planted a hearty kiss on her lips. "I think of life," he roared. "The dead are gone, the past is ash. I've got a ship, men to man her, and a woman with wine-sweet lips. That's all I need." He turned to the crew, shouting, "Patch your wounds and break out the ale. You'll run this ship harder than she's ever been run. Dance while you work. Curse you. We're bound for fat ports and ships heavy with gold." Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed our recording, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel so you don't miss any future audiobooks.